Many games have some type of enemy. These enemies are meant to provide some kind of obstacle or challenge for players to overcome so that way they can continue progressing through a level or story. One popular example of an enemy that you'd often encounter is a patrolling enemy. These enemies patrol around some part of a level looking for you as you sneakily try to slide by, or in some cases try to take them out one by one to prevent yourself from being caught. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how we can set up this patrolling enemy so that way it's capable of finding its way from one point to another, even if you've blocked off part of its path so it has to find some different way around. But before we jump into this video, this is going to be the first part in a series of stealth-based tutorials. So if you enjoy this video and don't want to miss out on future tutorials in this series, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below so that way you don't miss out on those when those come out. And while you're down there, consider hitting that like button if you enjoy this video. And with that, let's jump right into the video. All right, so my AI over here has already started up a few laps over here. He's already gone around a couple times now. As you can see, he's doing his laps, and he goes around any obstacle he comes up to. So the way this functions is there are 4 target points around. He was just standing at one. He's going towards the second. There's one over here, and that's where he spawns at, and then there's one over here in that corner as well. And as you can see, he goes around any obstacle that's in his way. So these, if I were to come over here, he's got one point somewhere about here, I believe. You can actually see he'll come straight for me, and he'll stop right there. And if I go ahead and jump like right over here where the second one is, you'll see he'll actually go around this this cube here before finally landing right here at his second point. And he does that for these 3 points where there's actually obstacles between his previous point and his next point. So, and he just keeps going around this patrol path. So this one's actually the beginning of creating a stealth-based AI that will actually be able to detect our player. So as of right now, he's not able to detect us. He's not able to detect anything in his surroundings other than if there's an obstacle between him and his next point. And that's about it. So it's pretty simple, it's pretty standard, and he'll be able to move around this environment pretty smoothly, as you can see. So let me go and jump into the video and we can see how to set up this patrolling AI. Before we actually begin making our patrolling AI, let me go and start off by showing you something you're going to require in your level. You're going to require a nav mesh balance volume. And in case you're unaware of how this works, this allows for our AI to figure out how to navigate throughout the environment. If I go and press P on the keyboard, you'll actually see that a huge chunk of the level gets highlighted green. Everything highlighted in green is considered navigational, and so the character is capable of finding a way from any one point to any second point so long as it's somewhere on this nav mesh. Using this, our AI will be able to naturally find some way from one point to another, even if we manage to block off part of the AI's path. So that way our AI is always capable of finding its way to the next point in its patrolling path. Now that we've seen that our nav mesh is set up, let's go ahead and start by making our AI. I'm going to create a new folder called Blueprints, and in here I'm going to make a new character, and I'm going to call this character Patrolling AI. This AI is what we're going to actually see in the world. So I'm going to take our mesh component, I'm going to provide it with some type of mesh. For this example, I'm going to use the tutorial TPP mesh that I have in my project. This mesh is what the player will specifically see on our character, so we want to make sure that our mesh is set. And we also want to make sure that this mesh is facing the same direction as the arrow placed in our character. This arrow represents the direction the AI is going to walk in, so we obviously want to make sure that our mesh is facing that same direction so everything looks a little bit more natural. And if you would like, you can change any settings in the character movement component. I'm going to leave this alone for now, but this component will control many things like speed, jumping, swimming, flying, and you kind of get the idea. In this tutorial, we're only going to be dealing with walking. So if you want to make any changes to the AI speed or anything like that, you can do that here. Finally, we're going to add in 2 variables. First one's going to be called current point, and this is going to be an integer. The second variable we're going to set up is going to be called patrol points. We're going to want to make sure that this variable is public so we can access this in the level later. I'm going to make sure that this is set to a target point object reference, and we're going to make sure that this is an array of target point object references. This is going to be used in order to find where the AI's next point it needs to go is on its patrol path. So we need to make sure that we're able to have a list of these target points so our player knows where. Now that our patrolling AI has its component set up, we're going to need to come back to this character later, but first we need to set up some additional assets that are going to be required for this AI to fully function. So go ahead and return back to the level, and again go and open up the content browser if you don't have it open already. In here, I want to create a separate folder so that way we're able to separate all of these assets. And then in this folder, the first thing we're going to need is an enumeration. If you don't know where to find this, you can find this under blueprints. I'm going to call this enumeration AI status. Open up the AI Status Enum, and we're going to go ahead and click Add Enumerator up here at the top. I'm going to call this first one Patrolling. That's all that we really need to do for this enum for now. We're going to be adding more onto this later on in future tutorials, but this will help us determine what our AI is currently doing and how it should behave based on its status. With that, go ahead and close down this enum and go back to our content browser. And in here, we need to create a behavior tree. This is going to be used to help our AI determine what it needs to do, and it's going to use that status in order to determine what its behavior should be. Go ahead and open up this behavior tree, and once open, we're going to need a BlackBoard for this behavior tree. So in top left, I'm going to create new BlackBoard, and then I'm going to create a BlackBoard called Patrol BlackBoard in the AI folder. Now we are ready to begin handling our AI's behavior. So in the BlackBoard, we're going to need to create two keys. And in case you're unfamiliar with what keys are, you can kind of think of them like variables and blueprints. The behavior tree is going to use these keys from the BlackBoard in order to help determine what the behavior of the AI needs to be. First key we're going to make is going to be an enum. Then in the details, we're going to click the down arrow next to key type. And in here, we're going to need to add an AI status. The second key is going to be a type vector, and we're going to call this target location. Now that our BlackBoard's all set up, we're now ready to return back to the behavior tree. You should see an option to return to this in the top right in order to return back to your tree. Then we're going to create a sequence. And then once we have our sequence in our behavior tree, we're going to right click on the sequence, hit add decorator, and then from the list, click BlackBoard. You should see a BlackBoard based condition now on this sequence. Click on this condition. Observer aborts doesn't matter right now, but I'm going to set this to both for later. This is going to be required for a later step in a later tutorial, but right now it really doesn't make any difference. Then in the BlackBoard key, I'm going to get status, which for me was the name of the enum we made earlier in the BlackBoard. And we're going to make sure status is equal to patrolling. What this means is everything after this point on our behavior tree is only going to proceed if our status is equal to patrolling. Now below this sequence, we're going to move to and make the BlackBoard key target location, followed by a wait. This wait is optional, but it will make sure our AI stops at the patrol location and we can make sure it's found its point correctly. Also, in case you're unfamiliar with behavior trees, these tasks run from left to right in the order that you see them here. So we're going to need to make sure that these are kept in order just like you see here. Now currently we do have a single issue with this behavior tree. We're asking our AI to go to the target location, but we are never actually setting this. So let's go ahead and fix that. In the top left, I'm going to click New Task, and I'm going to call this task Find Patrol Location. I'd also suggest creating a new subfolder called Tasks, since you may end up having multiple of these types of tasks later on. Once you've created this task, the task should open up, and in here is where we're going to find our target location for our behavior tree. First, create a new variable called location key. I'm going to set this as type BlackBoard key selector and make sure this is a public variable. Next, go and create event receive execute AI. This should have two inputs for us to use, owner controller and controlled pawn. We are interested in the pawn. So we're going to grab this and cast it to patrolling AI. From the patrolling AI, we're going to get the patrol points and the current point variables. In case you don't remember, these variables we set up in our AI at the very beginning. Then we're going to get the current patrol points actor location and using our location key, we're going to set BlackBoard value as vector and pass through the patrol points location. Before we finish, we also want to increase our current patrol points. That way we're able to move on to the next patrol point later. So we're going to grab the length of the patrol point and find if the length is greater than or equal to current point with a branch. If this is true, we're going to set current point to increase by 1. Otherwise, we're going to return it back to 0 so our AI can loop around our patrol path. Before finishing, we also need to finish execute at the end. Set success to true, and this will tell our behavior tree that everything is complete and our behavior tree is ready to move on. Once you have all this in place, go and close down the task, and back in the behavior tree, you should now be able to find the task called find patrol location. Make sure this is in front of the move to and set the location key to target location. Now that our behavior tree is complete, we have one final asset we need to make before returning to our AI character. So back in the content browser, create a blueprint class of type AI controller. I'm going to call this patrol controller. Go and open this up. Then in the event graph, use the begin play to run behavior tree, patrol behavior tree, and use BlackBoard, patrol BlackBoard. Finally, return back to our patrolling AI and make sure that patrolling AI self is selected in the components. Then in the details, you should be able to find a section to set the AI controller class like you see here. So we're going to go and set this to patrol controller. Now our AI is all set up, so we can just place it in the level along with as many target points as we would like. These target points specify points along the patrol path that the AI should stop at, like we had mentioned earlier. Then we need to set the AI to use these patrol points. Select the AI, open the details panel, and if your patrol points variable was in fact set to public, you should see an option for patrol points with a plus next to it. Hit this plus for as many patrol points as you want to use, and in each, drop down and select the patrol point. And with that, our AI is now patrolling around the environment, looking around for its next patrol point. In the next video, I'm going to show you exactly how we can use the same AI so that way we are able to detect our player and actually start hunting it down. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe button down below. And I also want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters who you should see over here on the right hand side. And with that, I'll see you in the next reality.